Hi everyone, welcome to On the Other Hand. I'm Ariane Zurcher. I have a cold, so I sound a little stuffed up. But again, second cold. I wanted to talk about something that I don't usually talk about, even though it shaped more than 20 years of my life. And that is that for over 20 years, I had an eating disorder. I was bulimic and I was anorexic. And I think that unless you know a lot about eating disorders, that can sound, you can have some thoughts about that are probably incorrect. I know I had thoughts about it that were incorrect. So for instance, I didn't think I was anorexic, even though I was about more than 20 pounds thinner than I am at this moment, because I didn't have a feeding tube or wasn't hospitalized. The other thing is because I was primarily bulimic in that I ate enormous amounts of food and then would purge to get rid of the food. So again, to me, that wasn't anorexia. Anorexia was someone who starved. And I didn't starve. The only way I was able to get so thin was because I was really militant about removing the food. So there are a couple of reasons I want to talk about this. One is because it was such a big part of my life for over 20 years. It was at the end, like a part-time job. I mean, it took up a lot of time and space in my head. And I'm bringing it up because it links into many of the things that I've talked about in my videos regarding creating and fear and the feelings of not being good enough. Also, there's an aspect of all of this, which is, I've mentioned this before in other videos, what I call microaggressions against oneself. Another word for that would be simply self-betrayal, which then leads to a lot of self-loathing, something else I've talked about. And I bring this up because it was disordered eating that became a way of life. It was the rhythm of my life. It was like breathing. It shifted depending on what I was feeling. If I was happy, if I was feeling celebratory, if I was sad, if I was feeling angry, scared, lonely, it didn't matter. Food was the answer. And it was less about food than it was about attempting to control and cope with the discomfort of feelings. Big feelings, and wanting to make myself small, wanting to make myself disappear. It was a way to survive. And I really can see that now, looking back. It was the only way in which I knew I could survive, was by hurting myself over and over and over. And so for a long time, it was my answer to everything. It became the rhythm of my life, a coping mechanism, a way to cope with everything and anything that happened. It numbed everything. It was like a scrim between me and the world. If I felt too much, I ate. If I felt nothing, I ate. It didn't matter. And then came the shame, tremendous shame. Crippling shame, which led to punishment, self-punishment. And for a long time, I didn't think of it as a problem. I thought of it as a solution. It was my way of coping, and I didn't know of any other way. It was a way to function It was a way to keep breathing. Eventually, I tried to stop. There were periods. Over those 20 plus years, there were periods. I would try to stop. And I would even be successful. There was one moment when I was able to stop for over a year. And I gave myself a little gold star. We had those daily runners, were they called? Calendars. And I would put a little gold star for every day. And that was my reward. But the problem was that I wasn't doing the work I needed to do to really make that change stick. I was the same me, I was doing the same things, but I just wasn't allowing myself to get rid of the food. So of course there was weight gain, and that made me feel awful about myself. And I envied women who could just embrace whatever their bodies were. For me, it was, my body was in many ways, it was my identity. And it wasn't perfect. And so therefore, I wasn't either. And that was shameful. I didn't have the tools I needed to heal. I was in therapy for a long, long time, decades. And while that, I don't know that it certainly didn't damage me, but as far as the eating disorder, it didn't help either. Or at least it didn't feel as though it helped. But then I had a therapist, he and his wife actually came to our wedding, who really encouraged me to get help, to get more help, to get help from a community of people. And so I did. And I found myself listening to other young women who, though their stories weren't exactly like mine, they were doing similar things. They were feeling similar things. And I thought, well, if they can find a way to stop and to change themselves, then maybe there's hope for me too. And very early on, one of those women came over to me and said, Ariane, if you're going to really have success with this, you're going to need to find something that matters more to you than food and your weight. And I thought, that's never going to happen. And I felt doomed. I felt like it was a curse. I remember going home and just feeling there's no hope for me. But over time, that community taught me how to live a different way. It taught me to talk about my feelings. It taught me to examine when I felt like I was taking up too much space. It taught me to question the things that I had learned and integrated into my life. And it showed me through their example a different way to be, a different way to live. It gave me structure and support, and for the first time, I knew I wasn't alone. And so I stopped. And I struggled. It wasn't easy. I'd love to say, and it all fell into place, and overnight, miraculously, I was changed. I was not. It took years and years and years. But I was able to stop with the punishment the punishing self-abuse of eating when I wasn't hungry, eating when I felt full, and my solution was to eat more. Finding other things that I loved more than food. Finding things that I loved more. That was key. And even though there was a spiritual component to that community and it didn't align with my beliefs, I tried to believe the things that I was, but I couldn't. And eventually I found myself drifting away from that community. But the principles I continue to hold dear. Things like anonymous acts of kindness, being kind. These are ideals. These are things that I work towards. I don't always do it right, but I try. Embracing compassion and empathy, not giving in to the feeling that I need to be small, allowing myself to create with abandon, to be loud, to embrace my love of color, my love of texture, my love of art, to let myself just go and not give in to the voice that keeps whispering, it's too much, you're too much. And so after several decades of that community, I was able to move on in my way, in a way that works for me. And so, as many of you know who followed me, you've heard me talk about creating and the roadblocks I hit, and I keep digging, I keep exploring, I keep trying to find my way through all of this. And it's worked, and it continues to work. And with each year, I can feel myself coming more and more into my own. Not just through what I create, but in my life as well. Now I have so many things that I care about so much more than food. I'm actually not really a foodie. I mean, I like food. It's fun to have good food. I love to cook. But it's not a driving force in my life. It's not something like when we travel, you know, I don't need to go to the best restaurant. I just need to get something to eat when I'm hungry. And that is just one of the most freeing feelings that I never thought I would have when I began down that path of having an eating disorder when I was 15 years old. I never thought I would have that. And the freedom is just beyond anything that I can express. So, if you're struggling, if food feels like the only safe place, I want you to know that there is life on the other side. There really is. There are so many people who have come through having an eating disorder and are now living their best lives. It's not like I'm the only one. There are lots of people out there, and they're doing things. And is life hard? Sure, of course it is. It's hard. There's always a struggle. You get moments when you get to coast, but then there are other moments when it's difficult. But it's possible to move away from a substance that is basically slowly killing you and find another way to live. It is possible. There are many of us. I used to look back on those 20 plus years with regret. I used to think they were lost. And while I don't fully embrace them, because it was a lot of years when I could have spent that time and energy doing other things, I also feel that it's done. It's behind me. And it informs me as I move forward. You're not broken. You are enough. You're stronger than you think. And there are things out there waiting for you to find that are far better than whatever substance you might be using in place of. Things you can't even imagine loving more. But they're there. They're waiting for you. And so are you. And if this resonated in any way, and you feel you can talk about it in the comments, please do. If you have questions, please ask. I don't have any secrets. I'm more than happy to talk more about this. If people want to hear, feel free to reach out to me. And finally, just know you're not alone. If you're struggling, you are not alone. But there is a way out. You're not alone. Thanks so much for watching.